The car that I am using in this series for testing is my Axial Capra. This one is a non-rear steer original Axial Capra. As far as modifications made to the car, it is still a completely stock wheelbase, non-modified links. I did remove the lower spring cups on the shocks because that's one of my favorite mods to get the cars a little bit lower. On the front, some of the suspension changes we have are also Deez bands, elastic bands, which help eliminate the nose lifting on steep climbs, helps hold the nose down, and really helps out while still maintaining full articulation of the car. So Deez Companee makes those shock bands for us. Other changes we've made to the car is we have a Reefs 888 direct power servo. I am running 3S batteries from Genzace. It's a 1400 milliamp 3S pack. That goes direct power to the servo. That servo is capable of 4S, the 888 is, and I am only running it on 3S. For the motor and ESC, it is still a stock Capra skid plate as well as Capra transmission. I am not using the dig function in any of this testing. I have got a Castle Micro X ESC along with a Holmes Hobbies Polar Stubby brushless 2700 kV motor. It is a sensored system. My Axial Capra also has hot racing portal covers on the outer end of the front portals only, and it's also got Samick 6mm hub spacers on the car. And the last change that I made to the car was a ring and pinion with overdrive for the front axle. So we're getting about 12%, which is pretty mild, but it does help turn a little bit sharper as well as pull that front end up and over on the steep climbs. Taking a look at our first wheel and tire setup. For the tire, we have got Pitbull Braven Berserker 2.2 inch. The overall diameter is 5.12 tall, and they are a 1.9 wide tire. These are the Alien Compound, and these have a lot of miles on them. I have run these on a Capra for probably over a year total of these things actually out on the rocks. So they are very well broken in. That's one thing I want to point out, is I made sure that all of these tires had plenty of run time to break off those leading edges and give them their maximum performance available out on the rocks. So the Traxxas tires, as well as the RC4WD drive and the Pitbulls, have all been used and broken in to get maximum traction possible. The wheels are just off of Amazon, and I've got scale hardware and beadlock rings on the Pitbull setup. However, underneath, it is the exact same wheel as these. I ordered 2 sets of these off Amazon. They're identical wheels. All I changed was a beadlock ring and the hardware on the hub. So no changes there. For our second wheel and tire, we have our Traxxas Canyon Trails in the 2.2. These are a 5.3 inch tall, and there is no width listed on the tire itself. But this is a good looking tire. It is directional, and I made sure to run them in their specified direction, which is noted on the sidewall. For our third wheel and tire, this is a different wheel. It just made it easier for me to test all 3 while I was out there, so I could have 3 sets mounted ready to go and just change them out on the car. This is the RC4WD drive Milestar Patagonia Mud Terrain in the 2.2 inch variant. It is 5.25 inch tall. The wheels are RC4WD drive Raceline wheels. They are a beadlock wheel with scale hardware on here, and they end up a very similar overall width as well as a very similar weight. Now for the tire inserts in all of these tires, I'm using Proline dual stage, but they are a 1.9 4.75 spec foam. So these are a 1.9 foam stretched onto 2.2 inch wheels. I like to do that because it really stops the side-to-side slip that the most dual stage foams you get. I like that these sit tighter on there, and when you get pinched into a crack, it's less likely to shift on the wheel. So all 3 of these have the exact same foam to make things a pretty even playing field. However, the Pitbull being the shortest tire, the foam is going to fill it the most, and the Traxxas being the tallest tire, it's going to fill it the least. So the Traxxas is going to conform more simply because it has less foam in it compared to its size overall. So you will see these conform a lot. These are also the widest tire out of the bunch, and you can really see and tell out on the rocks that there is a gap between the foam and the tire side to side. Now that's just the nature of a 2.2. but That is one difference that you will definitely see out there. So they fit the Pitbulls probably the best. The RC four-wheel drives also feel great, and these are notably too small for this tire, but I wanted to keep it even and run the same foam inside all 3 tires, hopefully to make it more of an even match. All right, guys, here we are. We've got our Axial Capra out here in Sand Hollow State Park. This is full of awesome sandstone red rock formations, and it's got a lot of awesome terrain for the RC crawlers. I love to take my cars out here and test them to their true potential and see what kind of crazy obstacles I can get these cars up and over. This one is particularly difficult despite any rig that I use. These offset steps where I'm trying to stay balanced on the wall on the left is very tricky. Just doesn't matter what tire it is. This is a very difficult obstacle. So that's why I chose to bring these here, is to see if the tires would make any difference on whether I made it or I did not make it on this particular set of ledges. Now, this is where most of the tires can get to. However, you get stopped by that right rear ledge on that right rear tire. We've got the Pitbull Brave and Berserker tires. Again, these are 5.1 tall, so this is the shortest out of the 3 tires that we have. They have good traction, and this right rear ledge that it's fighting right there, we're going to see some differences in performance of how these tires actually get up and over that. Right here, struggling to get the traction to push it up and over. However, it's the front end that's stopping us on this particular one. Right there, the front end wash is over, and I'm about to tip over, and I'm just able to steer into it, and the left rear stays high up on the wall, which allows me to take a unique line here where I turn off the wall in the front while the rear stays on the left side, and then I'm actually able to drive both front tires up that ledge, and that is how we get up and over this first wall. Now, unfortunately, I am driving and filming at the same time, so you may see some of the shots where the car goes out of frame. I apologize there. Now we've made it up to the top. I've skipped a lot of trial and effort here. Right here, turning a little bit straight and left to pull myself up and out of there, but the car gets it done after quite a few tries. The Pitbulls come out on top. Next up, we've got RC four-wheel drive Milestar Patagonia tires, getting a good look at them. These are very aggressive looking tires, and I will give them that. They do look the part. These certainly look aggressive out there on the rocks, look good on the car too, and they pair well with those RC four-wheel drive race lines. So right here, we're gonna pay attention to that right rear tire and just overall the amount of grip this car has on this first obstacle, whether it wants to pull its nose up in there or whether it does not. And a little bit of hopping there. This is, again, it's tricky to get it right. The left rear did not go up on the wall like the Pitbulls did, so now my car has stood up so vertical that it doesn't want to go up the rocks. Now I'm going to spoil it for you here, is that these Patagonias actually do not make it up this ledge. Despite a lot of effort and trying, I just was unable to get these tires to hook up and pull me in the direction that I needed it to go. Is it possible they could have done it if I would have sat there for 30 minutes? Sure. Did the Pitbulls do it in less than 30 minutes? Yes, they did. So in theory, that would give a point to the Pitbulls and a demerit to the Milestars here. I did get right on the line where I wanted it to be right there, and unfortunately, whether I'm turning driver or I'm turning passenger to try and work it back and forth to try and keep that rear axle balanced and pinched where I want, it just is unable to pull itself up across that next ledge. But I know that this car can do it because I had just done it with the Pitbulls. This is in chronological order here, so this is how things were ran. Again, working back and forth on this ledge, that right rear ledge really starting to just eat away at those tires. By the time I was done with these tires here, there was a pile of rubber at the bottom, so they did add some wear on that. But that's all right, just getting them more and more broke in. The more that you scrub these on the sandstone and it gets that feathered leading edge, they really actually get more traction. All right, here we are with the Traxxas tires, the Canyon Trails in 2.2. This is my first set of 2.2 Canyon Trails. However, I did have some 1.9s on a Traxxas TRX4 Sport. The compound on the TRX4 Sport really impressed me with how it actually broke in pretty quickly, which tells me that it's a soft enough compound to actually scrub in and do some work. But watch this right rear tire as it gets pinched in here. These Canyon Trails just get a bite and pull that car right up. It did not slip, it didn't care, it was happy to go right up that. So that was a big difference between these tires and the other ones we've seen so far. These certainly seem to have a good amount of traction in that spot. Again, missing that left rear up on the wall, but I can use a little bit of weight balance here, working the car back and forth and the way I'm turning. Luckily this car's got a forward weight bias, so I can actually lean the whole car sideways and dip that front end down and float that left rear tire where I want it to. Again, working it back and forth, skipping over a lot of effort and time and tries here, and for whatever reason I'm just doing the same thing over and over, hoping that one of the times I'll get lucky. And right there, just the smallest little blip of a throttle, and I was able to get up that ledge on the Traxxas Canyon trails. However, now my axle is too sideways, and I'm trying to work the car to level out that rear axle so that I don't get up the ledge and then just tip over sideways. So you'll see me taking a lot of small little backups here just to try and get my rear axle leveled out. That's ultimately my goal here. And then I also need to get the front end set up where I want. I would prefer to go out the passenger side at the top, but the front end just shifted there, and now I've got to go kind of in the direction I'm headed. Gonna move that rock back to where it was, because when the Pitbulls went through there, they did scoot that down the hill about an inch. So I didn't remove the rock, I just put it back to where it was. And to give it a fair fight with these Traxxas tires. So the Pitbulls, I went pretty straight and even just a touch driver as I came up out of there. And with the Traxxas, I'm trying to go more passenger now that I watched the video. I mean, again, this isn't a perfect science. It's me just trying to hit the same line repeatedly with different tires. And between the two, I mean, there's probably an hour and a half of time between then. So just trying to get this car up and out, get a hold of that, and it does. It does get a hold up at the top, and I am successful on the way out of that obstacle. So pretty happy. 2 of the 3 made it through a very challenging obstacle. Now we're back on the Pitbull tires, and we are in one of my favorite obstacles. This is the entrance into Mousetrap. This is Tyson's choice here. This is a long, very technical, steep crack, and you got to get it right to make it up in anything. So really, I guess what we could call this is a test of the sidewall traction on these tires. Because it's very steep, you will see a difference on tires with their sidewall design, whether it will pull the entire car up the crack, just riding on the edges of the shoulder of the tire and a bit of the sidewall. Another thing to keep in mind is these walls are not perfectly straight, so you do have to kind of bob and weave your way through here. So right there on that back left tire, there's a little nub in the wall that can really trip up cars when your rear axle hits it. For some reason, it just stops the cars on their tracks, and these Pitbulls cruised right through that. You could barely even tell that it was there, like it was nothing more than a speed bump. These Pitbulls did great coming up through here, and I was able to get that line choice just right to cruise on through. Next, we've got our RC4 drive Milestar Patagonias. Again, heading up through the bottom, getting ourselves set up, trying to wiggle that servo a little bit. If you get the tire too squared up on the side of the wall there, it can do some kind of funky things. Like right here, it's going to lift our front tire up, but I power through, settles back down in, and it's still on the correct line, which is why I didn't try and back up or do anything wild like that. So as we cruise up through this crack here, where that little nub was that I mentioned, I'm going to kind of point that out as the front tires start to go around it right here. Now that nub is right behind our front tire along the side of the car, and watch what happens when the rear axle gets up to this point. We're going to start spinning all 4 tires because that is breaking the traction on that left rear, or at least it's holding up the car for some reason. So I'm going to try and turn more driver, which would lift the driver rear tire, and just trying to get this thing to push up and over it, and not finding any success doing that. So I'm going to sit here working at it for a second, trying to make sure I get the line right. And you can see the difference right here. By the time, at this point in time, the Pitbulls were at the top of the obstacle, and these Patagonias are working for it a little bit more. The compound on these seems to be just a little bit softer, and the tread lugs are definitely taller on the Patagonias. These are definitely the deepest tread design of the 3 tires. So that's something kind of interesting. So right here, the left rear is actually starting to drop low in the crack, and that's when it makes it past that little nub. So kind of interesting there. I did watch the video back before recording this, and it didn't seem like my Pitbull tires dropped quite that low, so some kind of difference there, whether it's just more traction coming from the Pitbulls pulls it through there, and the Patagonias had to fight for it, but they did ultimately come out of the top. However, we did see a difference in performance there. Now it is the Traxxas' turn. Man, say that 5 times fast. Canyon trails, heading up into the V-notch. I mean, as you can see, my line choice, The choice is always the same, but what the car does is a little bit different each time. But ultimately able to get headed up into here. And at this point I had driven the other 2 tires through, so I kind of knew, okay, maybe I should try and dip that left rear a little bit further down in. And in fact, it does go a little further down in than the Patagonias do. It spins more than the Pitbulls, but less than the Patagonias. So they're finding themselves somewhere right in the middle. Traxxas making good time getting up and out of here. Not a challenge for the Traxxas Canyon Trails. Okay, we've got kind of a fun climb right after the entrance to Mousetrap. This is where the real canyon of Mousetrap really starts. So there's a little rock ledge here. I'm just gonna turn uphill and see if I can side hill, get the front end to bite and pull it up over that. And yes, in fact, the Pitbulls did grab and drive right over that. It did not push straight along. That was kind of what my test was there, whether they were going to bite and pull it up or just push straight along that ledge while I was trying to turn. But ultimately they were successful. Now we're on an incline and then we push into a wall, and watch this, as the car comes up to the top, it hits a small ledge and just drives right over it. Nothing, no drama there. We're gonna see some differences in the other tires that we test. Here come the Patagonias, working our way up onto that ledge. That climb right there is not particularly easy. You can definitely spend a lot of time and roll over multiple times. Turning uphill to see if it will scrub along or turn, and they do pass the test. They turn uphill, not a problem. And now we're going to come up here and turn hard right, and then we're going to push up into this wall on a incline. So the car is sitting on a 20 to 30 degree incline here. It's not flat, it's steep heading into this obstacle. So right here you'll see a lot more tire slipping than the Pitbull. Now I'm not sure if that's because I didn't get my rear axle in the same position, but it seems like my front tires were in the same spot. So I'm going to take a reverse, try and work that rear axle over a little bit and see if that will make the difference making it up this obstacle. I'm trying to not just completely rely on that right-hand wall. I'm trying to go up the left face and see if it will get the traction and push up. Again, taking another reset to try and get my axle moved over. I'm not sure if my rear axle was actually in a different spot or not on the Pitbull. You guys will have to comment below if it was. As I'm sitting here spinning tires there, it finally pulls up. But now as the car comes over the top, it hits this ledge and it spins all 4 tires for a second before it finds some traction to pull itself up and over. This rock was just a bonus. That I'm not going to compare that because the Pitbulls did not go over that. Traxxas Canyon Trails headed into the canyon, coming up the wall, turning left, barely hanging on there, but they get it done. As I about drive into Sydney, we're going to take a look at that little ledge, turn uphill, and all 3 tires pass that test, not a problem. I have seen some trucks not pass that test, so that's why I included it in this tire test series. Cruising up into this ledge. Let's see if the Traxxas has the traction to push it up the wall. I do have to end up in that little crack there to get the traction, along with that right rear just touching a little formation. All 4 tires spin at the top just for a second and then head on up, out, and get that bonus climb at the top. All right, guys. I want to take a minute here and let you guys just enjoy the footage of the main Mousetrap obstacle. I didn't see many major differences in the tires here. I just love running this line. But I want to talk about how I think that these size tires are just the perfect choice for the Axial Capra. They come with a 12.5 inch wheelbase, and with a couple Traxxas rod ends, which are a little bit longer plastic end, you can stretch the wheelbase on your car super cheap. You don't have to replace your whole link set. It costs just $4 or $5 for a pack, and you can stretch your car out kind of how you want. 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch. I think you could do a full inch if you really wanted to. Traxxas part number 5525 Traxxas rod ends. But once you've stretched your Capra, just like in real life, the longer wheelbase, the more tire height looks proportional. As you stretch a vehicle out, your tires can get bigger, which you want to get bigger tires because then there's more distance between your tires, which makes your belly a lower point on a breakover angle. So you want to bring your tires bigger to pick your belly back up off the ground and kind of keep it in that sweet spot where it's not too low, it's not too high. You get the clearance you need for the car. So that's a long way of saying, as you make your Capra longer, I think it's appropriate to put a slightly bigger tire on it. However, in the 2.2 world, there's a lot of tires that are well over the 5.3 inch mark, and I don't think those look appropriate on a Capra. I think the 5.1, 5.25 and the 5.3 tires is really the sweet spot of what looks best, as well as overall the best performance you're going to get. I've run 5.5-inch tall Super Swampers from Proline on my car, and that's where it starts to get in the territory of being too tall and messing with the center of gravity on the car, making it want to tip over sideways easier, because as your tires are taller, it lifts the whole car up off the ground and it's not helping your performance. I see a lot of people on the Facebook groups and whatnot put these huge 2.2s on their cars, and I really just don't think that it's beneficial. So like I say, as the car wheelbase has been slightly modified, this one is stock at 12.5 inch, but anywhere from that 12.8, even 12.5, honestly, I think this car looks appropriate with these tires on it. Just a slightly taller tire. You don't want to go too tall because you don't want to ruin your center of gravity. These keep your car low enough, but you still regain that performance of added clearance. Along with the portals, you get really good axial clearance coming over obstacles. So that's my opinion on the matter. Whether you really like the look of big tires on cars, that's a completely acceptable answer. I'm just saying, for performance, I've noticed that I don't want much bigger of a tire than these on a car with this wheelbase, with this style setup. And the reason I left this car with a completely stock link setup, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, is to make it more relatable for more people. I haven't modified the wheelbase of the car at all. This is just a stock Capra with some good upgrades on it. Some real simple stuff similar to what other people might run. Some brass forward weight just on the knuckles, on the covers. It's not a crazy amount of weight to add. A nice brushless system to help it crawl. And then, I mean, after that, you get a direct power servo. It does not have to be direct power, but that Reefs 888 is a killer servo. Something even like a Reefs RAW 500 would be a fantastic way to go as an upgrade for your Capra. You definitely want a good ESC with a good amount of power from the BEC to power your servo and give it more power when needed. Like in a spot like this where I'm real wedged up, my steering never gave up. I was always able to turn as much as I wanted. And then I can even use it in the crack right there to turn uphill passenger, and it'll slide the rear end higher up on that wall where I want it. So there's some cool tricks you can do with a nice powerful servo. But I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on what the best size tire for a Capra is. Personally, I would rather run a 4.75 than I would rather have 4.75s over a 5.5 inch tall tire. I've seen the performance difference, and I think the car will crawl better with 4.75s. Although it's also dependent. I might drag my belly a lot more with a 4.75 compared to a 5.5 inch tall tire. But there might be some obstacles where if I were trying to climb something steep, the 5.5 inch would have changed my center of gravity enough that I would flip over backwards, whereas a 4.75 would hold me lower to the ground, keeping my center of gravity low, and I would be able to make the climb. There's not a lot of obstacles where you will see that difference, but there are some. And there's a lot of steep inclines where it will make it either very easy to do or impossible to do. So it's things to consider. There's never a perfect setup, and it's always dependent on the exact obstacle that you're on, what the perfect setup is, which is why there's not a perfect setup. You show me something where the big tires succeed, and I can show you something where the small tires succeed. So it's always give and take. These are my opinions on it. That's why I wanted to put this series together. But in this tire range, I wanted to see which ones had the best performance, just with pure raw traction, driving over hard obstacles, which ones could consistently do it repeatedly, where the other ones struggled or failed to do so. And quite honestly, this test is very difficult because there's so few obstacles where the tire makes the difference. Pretty much in almost all of the testing, the tires just made it or they didn't. It didn't really matter what brand was on there. I am going to give my opinions on which ones are slightly better than the others, but they're all very similar performance as we've kind of seen to begin with. We're going to see a few more examples here towards the end, and then I'm going to give you guys my closing thoughts. All right, here we are back with the Pitbull tires. You guys might notice a little bit difference in the overall image quality here. That's because I'm trying out my GoPro Hero 11 Black for the first time. We'll talk about that in separate videos, but here we go, getting the tires up on the wall. This is extremely steep, and look at these Pitbulls just grab and go. This is an obstacle where we will see a difference in performance, and these were able to just slow creep and crawl. I didn't throttle up to get this thing to shoot up the hill or anything, And man, we really got some vertical height. And you can see there just how slippery it is, where I made one wrong turn and the car slid 6 to 8 inches back downhill. However, it never hit the sand at the bottom. It just kind of hit a sweet spot and then pulled itself back up again. So Pitbull's really fighting for traction here. Unfortunately, none of the tires were able to actually just hook and pull themselves completely through this. I ended up having to use throttle for all of them. Now the Pitbulls, I'm trying to hang on the wall and then give it throttle, give it a little bit of momentum. It was super close there. It was just bouncing a little more than I wished that it would have. And right there, able to get just enough momentum to pull ourselves up and out. And what's crazy is you can really change the amount the car hops just by adding more or less throttle. Now these tires I did not run in a chronological order here. I actually take a line that I had learned from the Traxxas, which I ran first, and just followed the line that worked with the Traxxas to compare it later. So we go far right and then we turn ourselves left across that ridge, which these made look incredibly easy. So that line was not easy, and these pulled the front end up and out, no problem. Here we are going up for the very top V-notch, trying to get ourselves up and out. The other tires, I really struggled with this spot, and it's kind of funny that this is the order I ended up running the video in, because this is not how it happened in real life. Because the first time I took the tires out, that was the order I ran it in. I changed up the order on the second run, but in the video I edited it in this way for a reason. And so our front end is getting extremely light. The car's trying to tip over that back right tire, and I'm just trying to get this thing set up. I really want to get my right rear up on the wall. However, I was just always unable to get that thing to get up there and hang on. For some reason, just too steep, too slick, not working out to my advantage there. A little bit of throttle there, and we're hanging on right onto the edge, and the front end pulls up and out of that. Guys, the Pitbulls were the only ones to make that line at all. And getting back to the taller and shorter tires with the changes in center of gravity, the shortest tire was the only one to make that, and the car wanted to flip with all the other ones. So the point could be argued that the shorter tire kept the COG lower, and that's why I was able to make it with these tires. Let's take a look at the Patagonias on the way up this wall. The Patagonias have the tallest tread lugs, which I have a theory makes them easier to fold over, and I don't think they can fight as hard and maintain their original shape to really like pull the car up and over obstacles. It's like having a longer lever. They're easier to bend because they're so tall. They look aggressive, but I don't know if that's really the best performance you can get out of a tire. And it seems like the BFG Krawlers, the Canyon Trails, and the Pitbulls do have a fairly deep tread, but these Patagonias are deeper than all of those are, and they just aren't leading the pack with traction. So I don't know if that's the specific reason or if it's just the specific compound. I'm not sure what it is, but I do like the tires. They do well. It doesn't seem like they are the absolute best tires out of this comparison, even compared to other tires that I've used. Using a little bit of throttle to finally pull myself up and out of there. They were able to crawl their way up a few inches up that wall, but weren't able to crawl all the way up and out. Again, none of the tires did, so can't really give them a demerit for that. These tires, we are running that far right line. Now pay attention to this. The Pitbulls, I basically just turned left and drove out of it. The Patagonias here, I'm turning left and the car is just not responding at all. I'm going full driver on the steering and it's just not wanting to do it. I'm trying to turn passenger to get that right rear tire up and out a little bit. There it finally goes. I had to use just a little bit more throttle than the crawl and creep that I've been trying to maintain. And even here, slipping tires. I don't remember struggling on this spot at all with the Pitbulls. For some reason, just unable to get the traction, have to work it and let that front right tire pull the car up and out. So now we've slid into that little notch on the back right. That's okay. These tires do pull themselves up and out. I think all three tires ended up there at one point, but just slipping and sliding our way along, which is no surprise. It's very steep right here. It's very slick with the small patches of moss on the rocks. And then the little tiny ledges on this vertical of an obstacle will absolutely make a difference. Usually when I'm working the car left and right, it's because I'm trying to fight or work around those little tiny ledges in the sandstone. And yeah, the Milestars, just unable to get a hold of it. The car starts to unload on me right there. If that right rear could get just a little higher on the wall, maybe it could have done it, but for some reason none of the tires wanted to get up on that wall. And again, just unable to pull it off up and out of this obstacle. You can see how light that front end is. It just doesn't want to stick and pull its way out of there. It's very close to getting the line that the Pitbull got, but at just the last second, it unloads on me every time. All right, now I hope I didn't make things too confusing, but this is the first time I had gone up this wall, and it's because I ran the Traxxas Canyon Trails first on this outing. This is a separate day. I wanted to go back out and get a second run and kind of comparison again, even for myself, and hopefully capture on video some differences that we see in the tires, which I certainly feel that we did see some differences here today. So the Canyon Trail's doing great, climbing up to the point where the Pitbulls did without throttle, and like the Pitbulls, we ended up having to use some throttle to get up and out of here, despite trying to creep and crawl. It was super close right there. Unfortunately, taking a few little hops and sliding down the hill, trying to get some momentum to push myself up and over the ledge, and there she goes. Which, by the way, this whole obstacle is a real buggy obstacle. I've seen cars go up this, and it is really wild. If you want to see a clip, check out my Instagram, West Desert Wheeler. Cruising up the wall. So the other cars, I went up the right side because I had learned from these tires that that was the line. And without being able to just crawl it, I didn't want to have to power through it for a tire comparison that didn't really seem fair. So with the Traxxas tires, I end up working around on this ledge, just able to get the car to go up and across. So I start working my way to the right, seeing if I could get a hold of some rocks over there. I think I may end up almost tipping over. Yep, that's what it is. Had to take a reverse to save it. A little bit of throttle, car starts hopping. It's very steep and it's a long way down. I don't know if you guys noticed how far up we climbed, but we're probably 15 to 20 feet up vertically, and it's a 45-degree incline down into the sand, so it will tumble a long ways before it goes. So here we are on the line where the other two tires came through. Turning left, car is slipping a lot. There we go. Again, they find themselves somewhere in the middle ground between the Pitbulls and better than the Patagonias. So kind of seems like that's the trend, doesn't it? Where the Pitbulls just seem to grab and go. The Traxxas can keep up. However, there's a few times where they slip just a little more, and then the Milestars, that just seems like if the car isn't going to do it, it happens to do it on the Milestars. So again, it's not science. A lot of this is feel while driving and just in my interpretation of it. If you guys are seeing something different, certainly chime in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your feedback. Definitely like to hear some input on your guys' experience with these tires, or maybe you've never even considered trying these tires. That'd be interesting as well. I have liked driving on all three of these. I've enjoyed my time with all of them. The Pitbull tires are actually an old set that I've had for a long time. That's the line right there where the Pitbulls made it and the Traxxas were unable to. Now we're coming into one of my favorite obstacles, and this is a tricky little spot because you have to follow, this is essentially two cracks that are going in different directions, and you have to make this turn, start pointed out to the passenger side, and then make the transfer over to the driver's side. And if you don't time that right, you are not going up that. This is a real steep climb right here. Tire's able to hook up and hold on, and here we go over to our next climb. This one's super slick, and you can easily roll off the hill right here. Again, I've enjoyed my time with the Pitbulls. These are one of the first set of tires in this size I'd ever bought, and I specifically bought them for a Capra because I thought this size would be great on the car. And this was on my original Capra, the one that I had painted yellow and silver, if anybody remembers that. And they just did great. Cruised right up that obstacle, not a challenge at all. Sydney impressed down at the bottom there. Sydney is my dog, if you guys don't know. Here we go. Got the Patagonias headed up into the crack, and I had figured out the line at this point. It did take me a couple tries on my first run of the day, but I edited that out because it's not really part of the comparison if it's just me hitting the wrong line. Here we go, cruising up, and then again, we're gonna turn sooner than necessary, specifically to hit a steeper line and see where the traction was. Spinning tires just a little bit, and off up to the next steep obstacle. Up this slick sandstone face. That back left tire certainly was further left than the Pitbulls were when I first hit that. So, you know, again, not science. I'm not perfect. I'm just out there driving my RC cars for fun, trying to figure out for myself which tire I feel is better for my car. And you guys could have totally different experiences if your car's weight is different. If you're running a C-channel car, or if you're running a flat rail chassis, any different rig, you're going to get different results. If you change out the inserts inside the tires, you can get different results. So that's kind of the interesting part, is that, you know, it's not a perfect science, and it's kind of up for interpretation, but, you know, that's also kind of the fun part. That's what makes this video interesting. How are these tires specifically going to do on these exact inserts on this exact car? Milestars got it done. They got out the top, but took a little more effort than the Pitbulls. Here are the Traxxas tires headed up into the crack. Full honesty here, this was not my first attempt at this obstacle. I kept dropping that right rear too far in, and it kept rolling me on my side. I think it took me 3 or 4 tries before I finally got the line right, but cruised up in there after that. And then the other 2 tires, because I had learned with the Traxxas, I hit the line every time on my first try. So the other 2, those were the first shots, and they did pretty good. Lifting a tire right there, which is always a good sign that the tires are getting more traction. Then there's so much traction that instead of breaking traction and letting the car slip and settle, that they actually are prepared to flip the car over. So when it's lifting tire like that, it's kind of a good sign that the tires just have a lot of traction. Taking a little spill there. Luckily the car stopped rolling when it did. It's easy to break an axle housing on this obstacle right here, because your car can tumble a long ways down the hill. Again, lifting tire, also just showing how steep this obstacle is. Trying to get that left rear kind of positioned where I want. Once it gets up on that ledge, the front end's so light it shifts it over to the passenger side. Working at it. This was my first tires that I put on this obstacle, so I'm trying to figure out the way that I want to test this. And then we're going to go up here and get a better look at what's going on, where my tire placement is. And just like the other 2 where we saw come out of the top, that's exactly where the tires were when the other 2 went over the top. This is a real fun obstacle, because I think we really see a huge difference in performance of just raw traction on a steep surface where there's just barely enough traction to get the car to make it work or not. I think this is kind of the defining obstacle of this comparison. And the Pitbulls I had run last on this day of testing, and we're seeing this footage first. So you guys are going to see the good stuff first. Since this is our last obstacle in this comparison, I'm going to go ahead and say that on this specific car, with this set of circumstances, the Pitbulls seem to perform the best. And we're going to see some evidence of that. So it's going to go up above, and I'm going to work it to the right, and then I'm going to start working it just a little bit left. You're going to see that left rear tire push right there. That's the key, is that little push it had, gave it just enough to push it up and out of the top on this wall. These are the only tires that did that with this car today. Now I'm like, okay, that was pretty good, because that was the last tires I had run on this obstacle, so I knew what the other ones had done and that the other ones hadn't done it. So I wanted to try it one more time and see if it was a fluke or if the car just had the traction. And yet again, exact same spot, gets the push, pushes the car up and out, and the Pitbulls come out on top. All right, last wall for the Milestars. Taking this right-hand climb up and out of these small ledges here. This is a really cool looking formation. I really like the shot there. That's just an awesome up-close view there. Again, you got to avoid these little cracks and work your car around them and do what you can. Right here, watch that back left tire. The Pitbull pushed right there. That was exactly where the car was with the Pitbulls, and for whatever reason, drove up the hill. But for whatever reason with these Milestars, it did not. The difference in the entire setup is the tires, so I'm calling it that these tires simply have less traction to pull it up on that specific obstacle and on multiple obstacles. I mean, this is the end of the second day of testing, and I had started to formulate this feeling of, you know, maybe these tires aren't exactly up to the bar that the other tires have set as far as raw traction and performance. Do I like the looks? Yes, I think they look great. The lugs are a little too tall is my theory as to why they're not performing as well. They were spinning a little bit at that top left line there, and unfortunately just didn't come out on top in this comparison. These guys are kind of mid-pack. They pulled off some great lines, and some of that may be attributed to the fact that the foams are too small for the tire itself. You could definitely put larger foams in these, and it would basically be like airing up your tires on a full size. So the Traxxas really tried their hardest. They were just unable to keep up with those Pitbulls. Again, trying that line, same as the Pitbull. The back left tire, just unable to push the car up right there. The car actually slips downhill instead of going up. And I did it twice with the Pitbulls. It hit the exact same spot and pulled it over each time. And these Traxxas unable to do it. And just letting our car kind of work its way over. And we're going to pay attention to, as it makes its way over left and it comes up the hill, are these tires going to spin as much as the Patagonias did? Because right here, the Patagonias really slipped and struggled for traction. And yet again, a perfect example that the Traxxas found itself mid-pack in this lineup. So ultimately, guys, like I say, again with this caveat, this isn't perfect science, but I greatly appreciate you guys watching. Certainly drop your opinion down below, because that is certainly all this is just my opinion on these tires on my car, reviewing this footage with you guys. I greatly appreciate your time. Be sure to hit the affiliate links down below. I will do my best to get all these tires linked up, as well as the different wheel setups on the car and the whole car. If you guys want to pick up a car through an affiliate link, it would really help me out. I am doing YouTube full-time. I have just passed my 2nd year of doing so, and I run a small business, westdesertwheeler.com, where I sell parts for Axial Capra to change it over to straight axles in case you want to rob a set of Capra axles out from underneath an RTR. Then you can replace them with a 3-link setup with the chassis mounted servo. I sell that bracket that I have made locally. It's all American made, American sold. It's me personally packaging it and shipping it, so that would really help me out. And then I also, on occasion, do cut and shut tires, which we're gonna get into in the next episode of the tire comparison, where I take 1.9 Proline crawlers and modify them to be 5.25 inch 2.2 crawlers, where I actually insert more tire into it, glue it back together, and kind of create this awesome ultimate performance cut and shut tire, or at least we're going to find out in the future how they compare to the Pitbulls, as well as a different style of cut and shut I've put together. Thank you guys so much for watching. Ultimately, end ranking for me, Pitbull on top, Traxxas pretty close behind, and the Patagonias just slipping and sliding on the ledges down below them. Again, that's my opinion on the matter. I hope that you guys will drop your opinion in the comments below. Before I go on too long, thank you one last time for watching. Please do comment. We will see you guys in the next one, and be sure to keep the rubber side down.